Arrays are used a lot in JavaScript. So there's a whole array of array methods to do things with arrays and their contents. All of these methods are heavily documented with examples in the MDN web docs. You can find them under static methods and instance methods. And this whole page is well worth a read once you're finished with the course. In the meantime, let's look at some of these methods in more detail. In the exercise files for this movie, I've set up a basic array called backpack contents. It contains 3 items, piggy, headlamp, and pen. And when we output it, you see them over here in the browser. All right, so far, nothing new. A very common thing we want to do with an array is just output all of these values in the array as a string. This can be done using the join method. And the join method is added directly to the object itself. So I'll just say .join, and then call it as a method by putting the parentheses at the end, save. And now we get a comma-separated list of each of the items. The problem is, this looks weird, right? Because there's no space between here. So I can pass in a parameter saying, now what I do with an array is contents. It contains 3 items. In the exercise files for this movie, I've set up a basic array called backpack contents. It contains 3 items, piggy, headlamp, and pen. And when we output it, you see them over here in the browser. All right, so far, nothing new. A very common thing we want to do with an array is just output all of these values in the array as a string. This can be done using the join method. And the join method is added directly to the object itself. So I'll just say .join, and then call it as a method by
Oh, take this veil from off my eye.
putting the parentheses at the end, save. And now we get a comma-separated list of each of the items. The problem is, this looks weird, right? Because there's no space between here. So I can pass in a parameter saying what type of separator I want. So if I want a comma-separated list, but I want some space, I say comma space, save. And now we have comma space. Of course, I can pass in something else too, space, pipe, space. So here you have full control over how you want to output those items. Also note, the join method outputs a string. So once we've done this, we now have a string that we can work with just like any other string. Another common task is to have a string that we can use pipe space. So here you have full control over how you want to output those items. Also note, the join method outputs a string. So once we've done this, we now have a string that we can work with just like any other string. Another common task is to add 1 or more new items to the end of the array. Now, in the previous movie, you saw we can do this by grabbing the array length and then just appending more content. But we can also use a method to do this. And the method is more secure because we're not risking overwriting anything in the array. That method is called push because we're pushing more items onto the array. So we'll grab our array, backpack contents, .push, and then we provide a comma-separated list of 8 if I want to add the new items to the front 5 item. And then we provide a comma-separated list of all the items we want to add. So here I want to add a pencil, and I want to add the number 5. Save, and now my array has 5 items, piggy, headlamp, pen, pencil, and the number 5. Push adds new items to the end of the array. If I want to add the new items to the front of the array instead, I use a method called unshift. Now, it sounds a little weird, unshift, and I'll explain why it's called unshift in a second, but let's just see what happens if I do this first. Unshift, sorry, spell it correctly. Unshift, save, and now you can see the pencil and 5 are added to the top of the array, the front of the array, slot number 0 and number 1. So why is this method called unshift? Well, there's a simple reason. The shift method takes the first item off the array. So right now, the array has the piggy as the first item. If I say backpack contents shift and save it, piggy is lost. We've taken piggy off the front of the array. If I want to take something off the back of the array, so the last item, in this case pen, I use a method called pop instead because I'm literally popping the item off the array. Now we have piggy and headlamp. Now all of these methods are fairly straightforward. We either just apply them directly to the array object or we apply them and pass on some parameters to do something. In addition, many array methods allow us to do more advanced things like apply functions to each item within the array. So let's see how that works. What I want to do here is add an li around each of the items and then output them to the console. To do that, I'm going to wipe out this example and then copy in this commented out section down here and take off the comments. Here, I'm going to use the for each loop. So the for each loop will grab each item and do something to that item. The for each loop doesn't do anything to the array itself. It just loops through the array to do something. So here we say backpack content for each item. Then we run a function on each of those items, passing the item itself in as the parameter. And what we're doing here is setting up the item equal to list item plus the item plus end list item. And then we just console log that out in the browser. Save that. And now we get a list. So piggy with li before and after, headlamp with li before and after, and so on. So the for each loop gives us the ability of manipulating the contents within the array and then doing something with those contents outside of the array without touching the array itself. You'll see down here, the array is still the same. We didn't touch it. There's another example here. We copy that out, paste it in, and uncomment it. This one is a little bit different. I'm just going to comment out my for each example as well. Here we're doing something else and even more advanced. We're saying we create a new let, and then we go to backpack contents to find the first item that meets our parameters. And the parameters are defined inside a custom function. The function grabs each item in turn, and then it says, if this item has a length that is bigger than or equal to 5, meaning there are 5 or more characters in that item, then return the item. And this will return the first item that meets this requirement, save, and we get in return piggy. We can then test it by saying, what if we just call it pig? Save, and this time we get headlamp in return. So here you can see, using some of these array functions, we can apply new functions to the individual items within the array, or we can customize the array in pretty much any way we want. As I mentioned, there are a ton of methods for arrays, and you can see a list of all of them in the MDN web docs, where you can also see code example for how to use each of them. Wherever you are, and just add some different items. Use different, sort the items alphabetically to find a specific item.
My burning sun will someday rise. So what am I gonna be doing for a while? Said I'm gonna play with myself. Show them how we come off the shelf. Summertime, and I live in CC. Rallies on the microphone where I'll sound shit. All the people in the dance will be that we're qualified to represent the LPC. Me and the way we done.
push the item back in the browser, we now get USB drive as an element. This will come into play in our next code example. So I'll comment out these 2 lines and go down to number 2 here. Add last item as the first item on the array. So what we need to do here is grab the last item and take it off the array. That's what we use the pop method for. And then use the unshift method to push the item back to the front of the array. So here is what I was saying in the setup to this challenge. But you can nest methods inside other methods. So I'm saying desk array unshift because I want to put something to the front of the array, and what I want to put on the front of the array is desk array pop. That would be the item that gets returned when we pull it off the end of the array. So desk array pop pulls the item off the end of the array and returns it to us. Then we use desk array unshift to put it back onto the front of the array. So we're moving an item inside the array. Save this, go in the browser, and now you see we've reorganized it. Nest pop. Go in the browser, and now you see
Şimdiki çocuklandığın bir respawn oluyoruz. Resmamala, yeah. Nefes panala, yeah. Diyorlar niye bakıyorsun öyle mutlu mutlu. Iskalı kanka. Benim için eşdeğer bu. Beşin almakla derler cennette yeri kalmam var. Kaçak çıktım beni sarmanla. Berberi dedim azal altlardan. Style'ım oldu from Tatvan'dan. Sanarlar iple vezir sallanmaz. Zamanı gelir estetik asarlar. İşte böyledir hayatta. Beklemediğin olaylar varlar. Çimen kokuyor mezarlar. Derman ziyan olacak senden kalanlar. İnan yetişir kervan. Viran şehirlerde yer kalmaz. Kalbim Dadaloğlu pentagram. Ona işlemiyor hiç fermanlar. Sen haçlı bir cermenken gel de translate'le dert anlat ya. Çöp mu geldi sarma kucağına. Kalbime sapla hançeri bıçağını. Hiç yaşamamış gibi daha önce. Senden yaşlı sandığında cevabın nedir aslında da. Her hatun seksim zarafet tercih cheat baba cheat. Çarşı karıştı iyi ki de geldin. Dur yeterince zihnime dönmeden önce gezinsek biraz bu limon yanında şiva. Sabreden derviş ediyorlar bir daha. Germiyan ol çeyizime katıl bir anda. Bu bir rivayet seceresi var. Bu gece bizim ötesi plan. Yaparız yine ne acelesi var. Ve bebeğim kalktık erkenden idare et. Sayılı kavşaklarda firar. Yiyene şifa, içene şifa. Bebeğim senin nerenin nesi var daha sana. Pelerinle gelesin varsa bunun suçu bana mı mesela?
Pardon her şey biraz eğlenmek içindi. Ama gökyüzü onun limiti. Ona diyorlar Jimmy Boy. O kadar sansasyon, provokasyon seni güldürmek içindi. Onun için basit bir seçimdi. Jimmy let's go.
Yürüyorum yanımda bir kara kedi. Dile gelip dedi bana bir sigara ver. Dedim kesinlikle bu bir simülasyon. Evim iki sokak ötede bir yer. Yine başa dönüyor hikaye. Tekrar sınanıyorum herhalde. İpin ucu kaçıyor elimden. Jimmy acil buralara gel.
Geceleri arabam disco. 12 silindir manifesto. Gezegeni peşine takar takmaz çalmaya başlar iki maestro. Sanılanın aksine bu bir komplo. Tempo tutuyor yanımdaki biblo. Derecesi kırmızı yanıp sönüyor. Jimmy acil buralara gel.
Sigaramın alevi meşale. Dumanından oluşan hayalet. Uyduruyor sürekli bahane. Dedim ona sakın beni deneme. Nereye gidiyor bu muhabbet? Kuruyoruz yeni bir medeniyet. Yine bana kalıyor ihale. Jimmy acil buralara gel.
Her an kırılabilir kafa göz. Sakın sanma ki bura metaverse. Ölümsüzlüğü kazandıramayız şüphesiz. Ama biraz sana zaman satın alabiliriz. Bu rakipsiz partide güzeliz. Derken DJ çekti priz. Kiss me dedi bana exorcist. Jimmy acil buralara gel. Pardon her şey biraz eğlenmek içindi. Ama gökyüzü onun limiti. Ona diyorlar Jimmy Boy. O kadar sansasyon, provokasyon seni güldürmek içindi. Onun için basit bir seçimdi. Jimmy let's go. Pardon her şey biraz eğlenmek içindi. Ama gökyüzü onun limiti. Ona diyorlar Jimmy Boy. O kadar sansasyon, provokasyon seni güldürmek içindi. Onun için basit bir seçimdi. Jimmy let's go.
Kafamızın içinde bir DJ sarıyor bir ince. Yeni şarkı çalacak sırası gelince. Kennedy yokuşunda bir goy goy. Yanında bir billboard. Üstünde Don Quixote çekiyordu TikTok. Bizim kafalarda incik oynar böyle ping pong. Polis geldi çalar kapın ding dong.
Ben polis değilim korkmayın. Üniforması yok yazdıklarımın. Dans pistinde bir denetimli serbest. Bana yalnızlığı sormayın şimdi.
Arka sokaklarda gezen cowboy. Atın adı B-boy. Bir elinde boya diğerinde bol. Kolunda da escort. Karşı kaldırımda çiziyordu Van Gogh. Dedik ona let's go.
Sakin olun aynı kafadayız. Biraz yaramazız biraz yarasayız.
process, something like this. Number 1, pick a random object and find its last use date. Number 2, pick another random item and find its last use date. Number 3, compare the second item to the first one and place the one with the most recent date first in your array. Number 4, take another random item and find its last use date. Number 5, compare this date to the last item in the array. If it's older than the one in the last item, then place it at the end of the array. If it's newer than the last item, then check it against the next item in the array. If that's older, then place them in between. Otherwise, keep moving it up, etc., etc., etc. This process is an algorithm, a list of steps. And if we turn this algorithm into code, we create a function. Functions in programming work the same way functions in real life do. We specify a series of steps, and based on the outcome of each of these steps, we decide what to do next. The difference between how we do this in the real world and how a computer does it in a function is, in the real world, we kind of fudge the steps and don't really think about what we're doing. In computer programming, we have to carefully spell out each step and think about the logical chain we create to make sure we get the result we want. Because, unlike a human, we can't tell a computer, sort these items into some sort of order that makes sense. We have to explicitly explain what we mean by sort, what factors should be considered when creating an order for the items, and what procedure to use to go through each of the items to get the actual sorting right. In this chapter, we'll dive deep into the world of functions and methods in JavaScript to figure out how they work and what we can do with them. So far in the course, we've mainly looked at data and how to handle it through objects and variables and arrays. But the main use of JavaScript is as a scripting language, meaning we use it to write programs, and that's what functions are for. A word of note here, the term function is typically used to refer to as a function that sits on itself, whereas a method is a function language, meaning we use it to write programs, and that's what functions are for. A word of note here, the term function is typically used to refer to as a function that sits on itself, whereas a method is a function that sits inside an object and acts on that object. They're effectively the same thing, they just appear in different contexts. Okay, a function can be created in a couple of different ways, and how we create a function has an impact on how it can be used. The classic function is a function declaration, and it's the parentheses, or it can have parameters, and then we have curly brackets wrapping around the function body. Inside the function add data, the function just open, meaning it really take press even at a declaration. You have the order in which these functions are declared matters for JavaScript to work properly. In a function expression, we set up a variable, in this case a constant, we give that constant a name, and then we set the value of that constant equal to an This pattern of using a function expression has become the preferred way of declaring functions in JavaScript frameworks like React, and the current best practice is to place function expressions in using a function expression has become the preferred way of declaring functions in JavaScript frameworks like React, and the current best practice of using a function expression has become the preferred way of declaring functions in JavaScript frameworks like React, and the current best practice is to place function expressions inside a const. That makes sense if you think about it, because the function expression is sitting inside a variable, and it will then have the same scope as that variable type. So if we're using a const, then it is locally scoped or block scoped automatically. So if you place the function in a const, it also cannot be redeclared. So you're never in danger of accidentally overriding or destroying your function. Finally, function expressions are not hoisted. They exist only in the scope they were created, and this is also facilitated by the const being used. So in a way, function expressions are a more advanced version of functions. To call and use either a function declaration or a function expression, we simply name it and add parentheses
rhyming and joking aside, if you took it with it, dummies and bias, you notice that I am insane. Improved a lot, but I still feel it's hard to keep my lid from popping off, but I prevail. How you gonna skip over the details and tell me to be focused? Hold that thought. Don't tell me you mean well if you don't mean well. I call the shots, but don't need my handheld. When it comes to making records, who you know does that better? The way I connect letters, you think that the alphabet was made by me. When it comes to storytelling, I'm great at it. Tune in and get tuned out. My face got redder cause I'm embarrassed for the ones unaware of my work. Where did I stutter? Known to be cordial, but those that think that never seen me in a war zone. My delivery gets better every time I spit. I don't keep my sword low. Tell me why would I do that? Does it make sense when you're in a game this cutthroat? If you want to maintain.
This is useful, but to fully understand functions and how they operate, then towards the bottom, we have a constant called main element. That content is displayed using this function expression called addPack. So now we can look at how the function interacts with the rest of the content. First off, this is a function expression, meaning we have set up a constant, we've given the constant a name, and then we've set stop object. Looking at prototypical examples of functions like this is useful, but to fully understand functions and how they make. Here we have systems inside the functions, green say stop constant called make demo to its core features. At the top, there is a standard object named greenpack with some basic properties. Looking at prototypical examples of functions like this is useful, but to fully understand functions and how they operate, we really need to see them in a real-life scenario. So in the exercise files for this movie, I've set up such an example, and you can see right away that there's a lot more going on here. In this example, I've reduced our previous object demo to its core features. At the top, there is a standard object named green main element. That content is displayed using this function expression called addPack. So now here we have this is really inside any current back. So write an article, and that article has HTML. And that's what you're seeing in the browser. Interestingly, we can also populate a variable with the same value. So I can set up a new constant to make repeat the function over and over and over again. The actual functionality of the function is wrapped. Here we have an anonymous function that has a single parameter, and that parameter is used throughout the function. So you can see it says current pack here, and we are using that parameter throughout the function. And this is really important for functions. When we have parameters, we can pass any value in and then reuse the function over and over and over on different values. So in our circumstance, we are passing in the green pack object, but we could, in theory, pass in many different objects, and then the object's name is converted to this generic name when it's inside the function. So we can repeat the function over and over and over again. The actual functionality of the function is wrapped in the
control, then you gotta keep up. If you can't handle the workload, somebody else will. How could you call me unskilled? That's like looking at Mount Everest and then calling it a small hill. Not at all thrilled, I'm in awe. Still trying not to laugh, but it just spills out. Sometimes I've been writing chill. Just chew on this till the record's built. Okay, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on you. Fool me 3 times, hold up, rewind. That's not even possible. Me, I keep it honorable. Who's your favorite? Let me know. Tally up, count the votes. Was it me? That's a joke. Hey, that's a joke. That's a joke. Yeah, that's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke. Hey, that's a joke. That's a joke.
Would you lead me to my doom? Yeah.
brackets, you can simply here you get something, you can place it in another variable or in an object or in an array and then do something further with it, or you can just use it right away like we've done here to may return data back to where the function was called. In modern JavaScript, shrink the arrow into an arrow something for me, an anonymous function that doesn't have and hover. What we need to do is take away the something wrong here for me. Instead, we're using anonymous works the same way as if I had. It's not just going to code prop on and here human without any.
I ain't here to break it, just see how far it will bend. Again, again, again, again.
I wanna make it with you.
Anytime, anywhere.
I wanna make it
Again and again. Sometimes the same is different, but mostly it's the same. These mysteries of life, I just
Parentheses without any curly brackets, and technically this also works, and technically this is also correct code. It's just very, very shortened. We need to take a quick sidebar here and talk about the arrow function, scope, and the this keyword. Earlier, we saw the this keyword used when we created an object constructor, and you may remember the this keyword can be used inside any object to refer back to the object itself. So for example, here we have a method inside our object called new volume. New volume contains a function, and inside that function, we console log out the text this volume in the method, and then we use the this keyword to refer to the volume property of the current object. You can see over here that when we use the function, so we call it down here, console log green pack new volume. When we use the function, we get the volume in the method, which is 8, so that's what's declared up here. And then afterwards, I use this volume to reassign a new value to this attribute, and that's the value that's passed in through the new volume method. It gets captured up here and then assigned, and therefore the second entry says this volume after update is 5. So we're passing 5 in to the method, 5 is then reassigned to the value, and we can refer back to this because this has now been changed. The important thing here is that this keyword works fine inside a regular function inside an object. But if I call in a function inside that function, weird things start happening. So to understand this example, which admittedly is a bit convoluted, I need to explain exactly what's going on. By the way, this is convoluted because these issues only arise in convoluted circumstances. So this is really the easiest example I could come up with that fully encapsulates what's going on. Below here, I've added an immediately invoked function
So what's gonna happen?
expression, which is an anonymous function. So you can see that we're running a function inside our method. And in this function, I say this volume in nested function, and then we again output this volume. Now, looking at this, you would say, well, we're doing this right after we redeclare the volume number, right? So we should get the same value as the one above here.
Yeah.
But if I save this, the output we get is
How the fuck?
20. Why? Well, that's because if you look all the way at the top of the file, we've declared the window object volume to 20. Now remember, I said if you use a function declaration, that function declaration is hoisted to the global scope. So what's happening here is this function is hoisted out of the object and up to the global scope. And suddenly, this is pointing at the window object, and we're getting the volume value from the window object, which is not what we want. This is where the arrow function comes in, and this is really important. So I'll copy this and paste it in. And then instead of using a function expression, I'll use an arrow function. So I'll say parentheses, and then an arrow, and then save it again. Now look over here. You see that the function expression outputs 20, so it's hoisted up to the global scope, whereas the arrow function stays within the current scope and outputs 5. The interesting thing is, this is happening because an arrow function does not have its own this. It does not know what this means, and it will refer to the closest available scope, which in this case is the object, and that's why we're able to get a hold of it. This also explains why we can't use an arrow function as the declaration for a method, because if we did that, the arrow function wouldn't know what scope to use, so it would refer back to the global scope instead of the method scope, and it will refer to the closest available scope, which in this case is the object, and that's why we're able to get a hold of it. This also explains why we can't use an arrow function as the declaration for a method, because if we did that, the arrow function wouldn't know what scope to use, so it would refer back to the global scope instead of the method scope, and therefore nothing would work properly inside that arrow function. So the bottom line is, if you're using this in a method within an object, and you then get an odd result, try turning the function into an arrow function to see if that solves the problem. Most likely, you're dealing with the wrong scope, and an arrow function will help you get the correct errors, and it will refer to the closest available scope, which in this case is the object, and that's why we're able to get a hold of it. This also explains why we can't use an arrow function as the declaration for a method, and it will refer to the closest available scope, which in this case is the object, and that's why we're able to get a hold of it. This also explains why we can't use an arrow function as the declaration for a method, because if we did that, the
But why he's saying can?
arrow function method MDN that explores will help you get the correct scope because it doesn't carry its own scope with it.
Ain't my thing. If I told you that I knew about the sun and the moon, I'd be untrue. The only thing I know for sure is what I won't do.
this image. It tells me it's home time, but I'm not finished. 'Cause you're not by my side. And as I arrived, I thought I saw you leaving, carrying your shoes. Decided that once again I was just dreaming of bumping into you. Now it's 3 in the morning, and I'm trying to change your mind. Left you multiple missed calls, and to my message you replied. Why'd you only call me when you're high? High. Why'd you only call me when you're high? Somewhere darker, talking the same shite. I need a partner. Well, are you out tonight? It's harder and harder to get you to listen. More I get through the gears, incapable of making alright decisions and having bad ideas. Now it's 3 in the morning, and I'm trying to change your mind. Left you multiple missed calls, and to my message you replied. Why'd you only call me when you're high? High. Why'd you only call me when you're high? And I can't see you here, wonder where am I? It sort of feels like I'm running out of time. I haven't found what I was hoping to find. You said you gotta be up in the morning, gonna have an early night, and you're starting to bore me, baby. Why'd you only call me when you're high? Why'd you only ever phone me when you're high? Why'd you only ever phone me when you're high?
And you open the door and you step inside. We're inside our hearts. Now imagine your pain is a white ball of healing light. That's right, your pain, the pain itself, is a white ball of healing light. I don't think so. This is your life, good to the last drop. Doesn't get any better than this. This is your life, and it's ending 1 minute at a time. This isn't a seminar, this isn't a weekend retreat. Where you are now, you can't even imagine what the bottom will be like. Only after disaster can we be resurrected. It's only after you've lost everything that you're free to do anything. Nothing is static. Everything is evolving. Everything is falling apart. This is your life. This is your life. This is your life. This is your life. Doesn't get any better than this. This is your life. This is your life. This is your life. This is your life. And it's ending 1 minute at a time. You are not a beautiful and unique snowflake. You are the same decaying organic matter as everything else. We are all part of the same compost heap. We are the all singing, all dancing crap of the world. You are not your bank account. You are not the clothes you wear. You are not the contents of your wallet. You are not your bowel cancer. You are not your grande latte. You are not the car you drive. You are not your fucking khakis. You have to give up. You have to give up. You have to realize that someday you will die. Until you know that, you are useless. I say, let me never be complete. I say, may I never be content. I say, deliver me from Swedish furniture. I say, deliver me from clever art. I say, deliver me from clear skin and perfect teeth. I say, you have to give up. I say, evolve, and let the chips fall where they may. This is your life, this is your life, this is your life, this is your life. Doesn't get any better than this. This is your life, this is your life, this is your life, this is your life. And it's ending 1 minute at a time. You have to give up. You have to give up. I want you to hit me as hard as you can. I want you to hit me as hard as you can. Welcome to Fight Club. If this is your first night, you have to fight.
Look, they gon' see me when I come through, and they know what I'm really up to. Man, you looking at a champ. It don't even matter what I do, cause it's true that I really can't lose. Now you messing with a champ. Now they really coming at me, let you know that I'm out of your league. Man, you looking at a champ. Ain't nobody doubting my team, we gon' get it, all of y'all can just dream. Now you messing with a champ. Why you looking at me? You can see me in the kitchen, I ain't cooking for free. Man, I'm trying to serve it up like I'm hooked on the steam. I ain't never had enough, now I'm booking the lead. You see, I changed the game, but they know about it. Now I really ain't the same how I go about it. Now I only see these lames say they never doubt it. So I put them all to shame when the trophy's mounted. They gon' see me when I come through, and they know what I'm really up to. Man, you looking at a champ. It don't even matter what I do, cause it's true that I really can't lose. Now you messing with a champ. All I do is win. Every time that I begin. All I do is win. Every time that I begin. Now they really coming at me, let you know that I'm out of your league. Man, you looking at a champ. Ain't nobody doubting my team, we gon' get it, all of y'all can just green. You messing with a champ. Stay winning, stay grinning, play with them. So I had to bring it back when it changed the game with them. And they told me go get them. So you know I had the ball to get a dog, won't sit them. I'm the greatest, I'm a champion. I ain't playing, man, what's happening? Got the dubs, man, I'm stacking them. If they come against me, I'm attacking them. They gon' see me when I come through, and they know what I'm really up to. Man, you looking at a champ. It don't even matter what I do, cause it's true that I really can't lose. Now you messing with a champ. Now they really coming at me, let you know that I'm out of your league. Man, you looking at a champ. Ain't nobody doubting my
basic function expression. That's when make a change to it, call the function, make sure it works, and finally create an arrow function, make it do something, and call it. This practice assignment is all the functions to work. Functions are a great tool for using or transforming here in comma, and then arguments and parameters work. I can start symbol argument later. I'll add 6, so value, and then output different content values. False, true instead. We can. The tip calculator function executes code and outputs it directly into the console. In some cases, we direct the current to the first component to each cross value we want sum, the tip, and the total down structure. Ask some percentage of value currency, and then US, back up, let's throw out the console again. So now we can see what happens. We call tip calculator and pass along the 4 arguments, the value, the percentage, the locale, and the currency. These are all captured as parameters up here, the sum, percentage, locale, and currency. Then we do the regular tip percentage math. Then we go into the console log and say we want to pass some values up to the formatter. We pass the locale, the currency, and the facility. We're using everything inside one function. Passing data to and returning data or the object functions, one depend on the other to output some data from.
The grid. A digital frontier. I tried to picture clusters of information as they move through the computer. What did they look like? Ships, motorcycles. Were the circuits like freeways? I kept dreaming of the world I thought I'd never see. And then, one day, I got it.
digital frontier.
vibe.
Chilling in your room, bored all alone. Now you're flipping through porn on your phone. Start jerking off by the bust a nut when your mom walks in the room. Jesus, what the fuck?
What she
Life is crazy, yo, it doesn't make sense.
Oh,
I'm here to make money, not to make
I
friends.
used to hustle like a fucking twanky to pay the rent.
Nowadays, when I check my balance at the ATM, I go, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
he out my booty.
I'm so hot right now. I need an Aussie, shit hot dick. This motherfucker meat is nasty. Hot right now.
The girl, let's go. Psst, I'm so hot, touch my face and go.
So hot right now.
Yo, Landy for
So
suck.
hot right now.
DJ Hot Deck,
So hot right now.
Zep Side Ninja.
So hot right now.
Die fucking Angvoer,
So hot right now.
Neil Blomkamp,
So hot right now.
Tony Siula.
So hot right now.
Show me the moolah.
So hot right now. Yeah, motherfucker, so what? DJ motherfucking What the fuck? Ik kan het niet fucking scheuren, wat een poes! Motherfucker! Wat de fuck is mijn fucking kakking? En die hoe de fuck is mijn kakking? Donate!
Jesus, Yolandi, I just left it in the fridge in case Gucci eats it.
Oh, sorry, Ninji. Hee hee. Yolandi fucking fasool up in the place. Waspa camisa, rock fucking vice. Pakkramies, thuis rond fucking pie. Feel myself with the milli while I laugh in your face. Fuck yelle naaiers, fuck yelle naaiers. Fuck yelle, fuck yelle, fuck yelle naaiers. Fuck yelle naaiers, fuck yelle naaiers. Fuck yelle, fuck yelle, fuck yelle naaiers. Fuck yelle naaiers, fuck yelle naaiers. Fuck yelle, fuck yelle, fuck yelle naaiers. Fuck yelle naaiers, fuck yelle naaiers. Fuck yelle, fuck yelle, fuck yelle naaiers.
All my fucking life, I lived a normal fucking life. Till I went and got myself caught up with the mark and the beast coming dope with the arms and the flows of real life, trying to cope with the highs and the lows. I got sick and tired of getting treated like a stupid fucker, so I fucked my enemies up one time and blew the fuck up. Before it was like, yo, who's that stupid weirdo? Now it's like it's a new breed of rap superhero. To defeat these devils, ninja becomes a devil. These godforsaken actions will never be on my level. Fuck you and your whole crew. I got you stressing, double guessing, cause I won't do what I'm supposed to. I don't know you, puppy say hello to my little two friends, I'm telling you, and I told you. What? Try to speak but your tongue's frozen. In South Africa I sleep with both my eyes open.
Fuck yelle naaiers, fuck yelle naaiers. Fuck yelle, fuck yelle, fuck yelle naaiers. Fuck yelle naaiers, fuck yelle naaiers. Fuck yelle, fuck yelle, fuck yelle naaiers. Fuck yelle naaiers, fuck yelle naaiers. Fuck yelle, fuck yelle, fuck yelle naaiers. Fuck yelle naaiers, fuck yelle naaiers. Fuck yelle, fuck yelle, fuck yelle naaiers.
Motherfuckers tell me to slow my roll, but sorry, no can do. My style is so brand new, I try to make you understand it. I'm here to steal the fucking show, cause baby, I'm a bandit. Now you're standing looking at me like the aliens have landed. Oh, hail the great walk ninja. Every boost with the phone wants to take